Hi, this is Dave. From time to time I get questions emailed to me, or sometimes called in, but more commonly emailed to me, or sometimes even in webinars and seminars, things like that. And some of these questions, I think, are broader than just that particular situation, and they impact other people as well. And so here's one I think falls into that category. And that's this, because this is a common kind of question that I've fielded this question on numerous occasions. So here's the question. Dave, how can we get inside sales to do some proactive sales activities each day? We want our inside salespeople to use some of their time to shift into the proactive mode to make outbound phone contact to existing and new businesses. Okay, so by the way, so that's the question, and I always, whenever I hear inside salespeople, I always ask the question: are your inside salespeople customer service or reactively oriented? In other words, they just take phone calls that come in, or do they have a list of accounts and they are proactively working those accounts? And that's a really a big distinction, and makes a big difference in how I answer this question. But just by the nature of this question, it seems to me that the inside salespeople in this particular situation are reactive. I mean, that is the point here, that they're reactive and they want them to be proactive. Okay, so the question is, how do we get inside or reactive salespeople, more customer service people, how do we get them to do some proactive sales activity each day? That's the question. Here's my answer. I wish I had $5 for every time I came across this issue. I really would have retired years ago. So let me answer it in two ways. First, how do you get inside sales to be proactive? And the simple answer is you don't. Now that's the simple answer. It's far easier to refloat the Titanic than it is to get a group of essentially reactive customer service type personalities to change their mode of operation and to then make proactive phone calls. That's because the personality of the typical inside customer service person just fights against it. Generally, the people who fill these positions are very reactively oriented. That's hardwired into them. By that I mean, if a customer calls with a problem, these folks will knock down walls to fix the problem and help the customer. They are great helpers and problem solvers. That's how they're wired. Now, that personality characteristic is one of their strengths and one of the reasons that they're good in that job. However, if you ask them to make 10 phone calls to people who are not expecting the call, proactive calls, in other words, the typical customer service representative will lose sleep the night before worrying about it. And when they're supposed to do this proactive calling, they will discover that the amount of other work they have to do has swollen up and crowded out the time they had dedicated to proactive phone calls. They rarely get to it because other stuff gets in the way. So my first answer to the question of how do you get inside salespeople to become proactive is, don't bother trying. You'll be swimming against the current, expending great quantities of time and effort trying to make something work that is probably not going to work. You'll find yourself and your inside salespeople becoming increasingly frustrated, and this frustration can spill over into other aspects of the job, poisoning an otherwise positive work atmosphere. So my first response is, how do you do it? Don't bother. Okay, instead, here's an alternate approach. Hire someone who can be totally dedicated to proactive work. So create a new job that lumps all that proactive work together in one person's job, and then hire someone to do that proactive work. And there's a rule here. And the rule is, when a person has responsibility for both reactive and proactive calls, the reactive will always swell disproportionately, crowding out the proactive. I even have an acronym I use. It's so common I've created an acronym. It's OSE, and that means other stuff expansion. Whenever somebody who has got proactive and reactive responsibilities, other stuff expansion will happen. In other words, the reactive stuff will just swell and become more and more influential and take over all their time. It's inevitable. Now, as an alternative, it is possible that you have one person right now in customer service or inside sales who may be a bit different from the rest and whose personality leads you to believe that he or she might actually enjoy proactive calling. So maybe you have somebody. I think it unlikely, but if you do, it's good for you. So if that's the case, then consider creating a new job for this person and having him or her do all the proactive work for the department. So here's the rule. Again, how do you get reactive people to be proactive? You don't. I'd rather you create a job and hire someone specifically for that who has a different kind of hardwiring. Now, it may be that the circumstances of your situation will not allow you to hire a new person or create a new position. If that's the case, then I'm going to give you my second answer. So my first answer is don't bother. But if that's just not viable, then here's my second answer. So again, how do you get inside salespeople to be proactive? Okay, if you must, then be guided by these guidelines. So here's a set of guidelines if you have to do it. Number one, make the proactive task extremely specific. So for example, your direction should not be something like, quote, call 10 people and see if they need anything, end quote. That's not going to get it. Instead, the task should be something like this. Quote, from 3 to 4 p.m. every Tuesday, call the 10 people on the list I give you and make this 50-word presentation, which I have written out for you word for word. Okay, see how much more specific that is? Call 10 people and see if they need anything. That's so general, it's frightening. If it's very specific, it's much more achievable. So your directions to them should be very, very specific. The more specific the task is, the more likely it is to happen. The more general is your direction to them, the more likely they will find it difficult to follow. So number one, make it extremely specific. Number two, train them in the task. Wow, don't expect that they automatically know how to do what you want them to do. So, I mean, honestly, you could do this probably in a 2-hour training session. Have everyone role play the phone call. So you create a little script, have them role play the phone call, identify all the possible responses, create strategies for each one, have them memorize the script. By first doing this kind of training, you accomplish a couple things. First, you're improving their skills in the specific task you've assigned to them and making it much more likely that they will accomplish it effectively. Second, and maybe even more importantly, you will have enhanced their confidence in their ability to do it and altered their self-image in a positive way. See, if they see themselves as being competent at proactive calling, if they really believe they can do it successfully, they will be much more likely to attempt it. That's number two. Number three, measure and publish their progress. Keep track of how many calls each person makes and how successful is each call, and share the successes with everyone in the group. Now, this adds to the perception that they can indeed do the thing that you want them to do, because they see that their colleagues are doing it successfully. So focus on the successes and reward and publish and broadcast them. Number four, reward all success. When someone has a successful call, praise that person in front of everyone. Lavishly reward them for doing what you ask them to do. Success begets success. Make a big deal of everyone's success so they all feel more capable of doing this part of their job. Transforming essentially reactive customer service into proactive salespeople is a task that is harder than almost anyone anticipates and is in most cases next to impossible. Typically, the managers who want to make this transformation are sales managers who have years of sales experience. To them, making some proactive phone calls is no big deal. They think everyone can do it. And this may be true from their perspective, but it certainly is not true from the point of view of the customer service people who just are not hardwired that way. You're asking them to do something that's difficult and threatening for them and way outside of their core skills and abilities. So, how do you get customer service people to be proactive? Don't try. But if you must try, follow those guidelines. Okay? I hope that's helpful. By the way, sales managers, if you're looking for a place, to kind of come into contact with this kind of content and rub shoulders with other sales managers who maybe have had the same experience you have, where do you go to get that? Well, here's where you go. You go to the XI community. XI stands for Excellence and Influence. It's a community. We're gathering together sales managers and help them improve their skills and improve their sales force and become more fulfilled and more competent as a result. Costs $5 a month. Yeah, I know, $5 a month. So anyway, I'll put the link in the show notes. Click on the link, check it out. I'd like to have you join the sales managers group in the XI community. Okay, that's it for today. We're done. Bye-bye.